Hey, good morning, y'all. Happy Monday. Josh's Severe Weather here to talk about what's going to be a very active weather pattern here. Today, January 16th, believe it or not, is the midpoint of meteorological winter. Winter for meteorologists, at least for record keeping, lasts from December 1st to February 28th, 29th, of course, in a leap year. And we are halfway through that period right now. And it's been an interesting one so far. Maybe not so much on the Gulf Coast and in the Southeast, but for many others around the Great Lakes. And I'm going to talk about what the second half of winter is looking like here in a little bit. I'm going to share my screen with you all right now so you can see what the next few weeks holds. And we are in an active weather pattern, no question about it. This active weather stretch is going to continue with some change coming, and that's going to lead to, for some folks, a lot more snow than what we've dealt with over the first half of winter. Now we've got cold air coming in from the central parts of Canada, and we've got warm air remaining across the southeastern United States. We've seen a lot of severe weather with storm track after storm track blasting through California and then across the midsection of the country and cutting up through the Great Lakes. Now, with this area of frigid air starting to take back over the next couple of weeks and a busy storm track continuing, we've got a couple of different ingredients in place for what I think could be some more significant snow for some of us here in the Northeast. So I'm going to kind of dive down into that. This backdrop is actually the precipitation departure forecast map over the next 35 days. So the next 5 weeks are going to be very active here across the Tennessee and Ohio Valley and across the South with very heavy precipitation. And finally, out west, we see a drier weather pattern for the West Coast. We are going to see some improvement after a very relentless wet pattern breaking here around the 20th of January. So we're going to unpack all these details for you. This is the temperature forecast over the next week from the GFS Extended Ensemble from weatherbell.com. And you can see this is not really a shocker to anybody, but mild air remains in place over the eastern half of the country. We've had kind of a chilly weekend in the southeast. Florida's had some frost. That will eventually evaporate into a warmer stretch of weather. And we are going to see some chillier temperatures out west. All the snowpack that's built up is going to start to advance east. Here is kind of our advancement of colder air. We have more of a source region for colder air coming down, and we'll see as we get to the end of the weekend and early next week, this very warm weather pattern that we're in around the Great Lakes and Northeast does slowly cool down. However, we've got kind of a big tug of war zone here. So definitely turning colder in Texas and the southern plains for the last part of January. However, it does not get colder here on the East Coast. In fact, it stays mild with respect to average. And if anything, that mild air looks like it's going to win out. So anytime it looks like we get sustained cold coming south and east, we are brought back to our senses in that this is a La Nina winter. This is a mild winter with warmer than average temperatures over the Atlantic and Gulf Coast regions. And this does not fare well for those of you that want to see snowfall and winter weather across the Carolinas, the Southeast. But where the two are lined up, and I say lined up, where the contrast is greatest between mild in the Southeast and cold in the Great Lakes will be a very active storm track. And this could favor a lot better news for those of you that want to see some snow here across the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. Same for the central part of the country, maybe even the southern plains, and also for New England. The Northeast coast is going to be our huge wild card. Now, I've seen there's other videos out there circulating on YouTube. There's been Facebook pages talking about it for a while. That the Northeast is going to get blasted. I'm here to tell you that that is definitely not a guarantee and definitely not something that I am predicting. I don't think that this is going to be a very favorable weather pattern for a big mid-Atlantic storm. I've seen a lot of questions from those of you here in the Northeast wondering when we're going to have big snow. Does that mean it can't happen? No, of course not. However, when you've got all this mild air and you've got above average temperatures off the water, then it's going to take a storm track at just the right time with enough cold air pouring in, which basically means these greens over here need to be shifted eastward into the Great Lakes for us to see a major winter storm. The interior of the Northeast, though, we will see some relief from the snow drought that we're in before things start to warm back up here in February. But notice there is still some cold air lurking across eastern Canada, and All it's going to take is one shot of cold coming down here for some interesting weather across the mid-Atlantic region. So that's what I'm going to keep in mind for you guys here. But even though Texas may get pretty cold here at the very end of January, it does look like it does start to warm back up. So I'm not expecting a repeat of February 2021. There will be cold air coming down. There could be wintry weather, at least for northern and central Texas and West Texas. However, the prospects of something extreme dropping all the way down here do not look very high. In fact, they look to be extremely low. And out west, we stay chilly across the interior. It's going to be drier, but it's going to be kind of a cool and dry weather pattern here over the next several weeks. You can see the overall forecast over the next 35 days. So the next 5 weeks, starting middle of January, going through towards the end of February, still looks mild across the eastern half of the country, but colder here across the western half, as opposed to the month before where it was just warm pretty much everywhere except the interior of the Northwest. We see expansion of the cold across the west, but also expansion of the mild weather back across the eastern United States. So this is not what you want to see if you are a snowstorm fan across the Northeast. In the Great Lakes, though, that could be a different story, and I'm going to show you why. Here is the extended GFS precipitation forecast. And this week, we see a lot of moisture in the Southwest. We will have heavy mountain snow in Arizona and New Mexico and Colorado and Utah. We see a bit of a drought here across the southeastern coast. It's actually not been super wet here in Raleigh. A bit of a drought up the East Coast, but that's going to change here as we get into a wetter weather pattern over the next several days. Could be pretty darn wet here across the Southeast. Late this week and into next week. A very active track coming out of the Western Gulf and up the East Coast. Meanwhile, notice in the West, we have a huge flip coming where we've been way above average rainfall-wise over the last 3 to 4 weeks. Now we're going to be well below average, giving us a chance to dry out. And I think that is actually needed at this point. We do need more rain out west. However, we need a break before the next batch of rain comes in. So a big flip in the weather coming out west. While I am definitely concerned about this amount of heavy rainfall here, where we could be dealing with localized flooding as we get later into January and into the beginning of February. It could be a very active pattern right in this area. And this is just an ensemble, does not mean that there could not be a solution that works out that's a lot more extreme than this. It's just weighing in all the potential ensemble members here. So in the Northwest, it should get wet again here early in February. Still drier than average, though, on the Gulf Coast, and that dryness increases, which means we're likely going to see higher pressures here, and the weather pattern that is stormy shifts back to the west a little bit more here and entails Oklahoma, Missouri, and Kansas. So could be an interesting setup here if we've got this much moisture in place where places like Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota could cash in on quite a bit of snow here, and then places like Oklahoma and Arkansas could see back and forth tugs of war between colder outbreaks with snow and ice and then warmer outbreaks with tornadoes included. So some very extreme weather coming here in the next month across this portion of the country. It's going to be buckle up and watch here. So here is a look at the tropical tidbits jet stream pattern. You guys can see the west is cooling down here as we've got high pressure taking place, but the jet stream that accompanied all those storms does not look to let up. We've got storm after storm going right across the center of the country and up the East Coast. Boom, boom, boom. There's no break coming. This is the beginning of February. So you can see the first of these storms moving into the Great Lakes, the next one across the Mid-South at the end of the week, another storm coming up out of the Gulf here early next week, yet another one coming towards the middle of next week, another one at the end of next week, and then as we head to next weekend, yet another big blast. So the jet stream is going to stay super active here. It's going to shut off the shot of polar air coming down. You do see some cold air dropping down behind this storm, but not going to be linking up with the subtropical jet to produce big snows across the south. However, in the central part of the country, that certainly is a possibility. And you'll take a look here on weatherbell.com. We see our first storm moving into the upper Midwest here tonight, tomorrow. Could produce locally stronger storms in eastern Iowa and northwest Illinois, but not going to be a major outbreak. The next storm is tracking through California. This is going to be the last one that batters California. It's dropping so far south that we're going to be dealing with wintry weather in the Four Corners region by tomorrow and tomorrow night. And then that storm does again track northeast, but a farther south track. We do see on Wednesday and Thursday a pretty good amount of wind aloft here for some severe weather. I don't think this is going to be a repeat of last week when we get into Alabama and Georgia, but farther west, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, you certainly want to be watchful for this potential of severe weather. Another big storm drops down here, but notice the fact that we've got ridging moving into the west coast here at the end of the week. That's going to deflect the storms from Northern California, and then they're just going to drop down and gather moisture over Texas and Louisiana. So we will see a very active storm track for the western Gulf Coast states over the weekend. And with this storm coming up this way, we could have once again severe weather, and this will drop farther south in the Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, and now northern Florida gets involved. In the Carolinas, we could see a little severe weather out of this as well, depending on where the warm sector sets up. It could very well just be confined to the coastal regions, but definitely an active track over the weekend and early next week here over the southeastern coast. We have another big storm following on the heels of that one. So a week from now, we're looking at the southwest, a storm cutting through. We've got colder air coming down, so things could be interesting in West Texas and Oklahoma. And once again, an active storm track here with strong winds aloft, a lot of rising air, and possibly some more severe weather across the central and eastern Gulf states, maybe even into the southeastern coast. And then the following storm track looks like it's farther south and east. But this is definitely going to make for active weather here over the Ohio Valley and into the Northeast as well. I'm not just focusing on the warm part of the storm, but definitely an active track over the north. I don't see anything phasing, so we're not likely to see a big East Coast storm. Everything here is progressive, meaning it's moving quickly. It's not getting stuck and dropping moisture back. But nonetheless, a very active storm pattern. We're going to see extreme weather continuing into the beginning of February as well, according to the operational GFS. So what does that mean at the ground here? Well, we've got a storm over New England that's spinning, but will be fading on Tuesday. Next storm tracks through the upper Midwest and Great Lakes. Not going to be a big weather maker. The one after it, though, will be more active, and we'll likely see thunderstorms and some heavy rainfall from Missouri into Louisiana and East Texas on Wednesday, and maybe a pretty big snow from Denver into Omaha, Des Moines, and just north of Chicago. There's going to be a dividing line somewhere here, and I think it's going to be the North Shore, where northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin get blasted with heavy snow Wednesday and Wednesday night. Farther east, we're looking at rain, though, with all this mild air coming in. Could be some stronger storms as well Thursday, but this faster timing means I think it's a lot less likely we see a tornado outbreak across Alabama. Things are more progressive. So by the time the warm air and moisture meet up with the front, things have already advanced eastward. So I think this storm is not going to be as bad for us here in the southeast, but we'll watch it. If this ends up slowing down by 6 or 12 miles, we could be in for another round of severe weather. Right now, it doesn't look like that happens, though, fortunately. At the end of the week, the storm track here is too far north for anything but rain for the big cities of the Northeast. That should sound like a broken record to you, but when you get farther north, we see quite a bit of snow here across New England. That storm leaves over the weekend. Next one comes out of the Gulf. More thunderstorms, maybe severe weather here in the warm sector across the Gulf states over the weekend, and maybe even up into the parts of eastern Virginia and the eastern Carolinas over the end of the weekend and early next week. Now, we've got colder air coming down, and that will mean some snow. Finally, if this forecast holds, finally some snow in southern and central Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio. Every place that looked like it was going to try to snow beforehand just didn't. Now we may finally see an active enough storm track to produce snow in areas that haven't seen it. The bad news, though, in the Northeast, by the time that snow gets to you, things are fading quickly early next week. So while it could snow, we're not looking at a big one here. The next storm track looks very similar, actually starts to move back north again as the warm air winds out here towards the end of January. And again, that means interior snowfall, maybe some ice in the Poconos, but primarily rain and thunderstorms here across the southeastern United States. Once again, we could have severe weather from this storm system. And then that moves out and we get a little bit of a break. And then you can see, once again, we're looking at a good tug of war here between warm, moist air over the southeast and colder air dropping down from Canada. The current situation here, we do have winter storm warnings out for Maine and winter storm advisories farther west. We do have frost and freeze warnings for Florida, where it's been pretty cold here. And in the southwest, we have winter storm watches and warnings as well. And notice we do have the threat for winter weather for the Denver area extending into the Omaha region, an area that has not seen a whole lot of snow yet. except for right before Christmas time, does have the possibility of seeing some more. Now let's talk about the severe weather threat. There will be thunderstorms later today and tonight, maybe a few stronger storms in here, but nothing that should be widespread severe. That storm fades quickly. The next storm gets going from the southwest, and we do have a slight risk for severe weather from the Storm Prediction Center for Wednesday and Wednesday night. It favors Louisiana, East Texas, Arkansas, western Mississippi, and maybe, if this is a little quicker, could sneak into Alabama very early in the day on Thursday. Now, the Storm Prediction Center does not see that there's a strong enough chance for severe weather on Thursday. This is where I disagree with them. I do think the storm track, while it's moving northeastward, there'll be enough wind aloft to produce potentially still some severe weather on Thursday. However, I don't think we're looking at the same setup as last Thursday with widespread strong tornadoes. I do think there could be some tornadoes, and I'll show you where that area is going to be, but I don't think we're looking at as widespread of an outbreak. This is the SIPS page. This is Wednesday and Wednesday night, a 30% chance of severe weather. So you can see the analogs continue to show what looks to be even a more robust outbreak of severe weather than what the Storm Prediction Center is forecasting. The reason for that is that the Storm Prediction Center is looking at all the models. It's looking at the amount of moisture, the amount of instability, and it doesn't think that there's enough agreement for there to be a big time severe weather outbreak. However, the analogs say that that is a possibility. So right now, I'm telling you, just be vigilant and be on the lookout for maybe an upgrade coming over the next couple of days. But there's still a chance that we could see that upgrade doesn't happen and that things kind of blow up and fall apart as we lose the amount of instability that's required to continue to produce these thunderstorms in a more organized fashion. Now, as we go on one day further into Thursday, the chance for severe weather is lower. However, the areas that just got hit last Thursday are highlighted in a 15% risk. So what this is saying is there's enough coming from the analogs to provide us with at least the potential for some severe weather. And I do believe that will include the threat for tornadoes, but it is a smaller area. So this is more of a relief for those of you in Alabama that maybe there was a concern a couple days ago for a larger area of severe weather. There could still be those severe storms that produce strong straight line winds. And that, of course, is not going to be a good thing for us here. As all the folks that are still cleaning up from last week's storms will be under the gun for some stronger wind. So right now, my guidance to you is to just keep monitoring. I don't think this is going to be a major outbreak of tornadoes, but I really didn't think last week was going to be either, and that turned out to be wrong. This time, I would rather you be a little bit over-prepared and have things kind of fade as they come eastward, and this model suite ends up being overdone than the alternative where you're not prepared and you're dismissing what could be a major outbreak. So right now we're kind of in the middle of those, still about 3 days out, so things could likely still change. Here's the European model. You'll see as we head into Wednesday, it will be active, lots of rain and thunderstorms here. This is the lightning density map. This is Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday night. And overnight Wednesday night, there'll be a stormy night across Mississippi and Louisiana, maybe eastern Arkansas. But as we head into Thursday morning, notice how the European kills things off here with a much smaller chance for storms. There will be some thunderstorms for sure. There will be strong winds, but we're losing a lot of instability. And that's why the Storm Prediction Center has not put us in a slight risk or at least a hatched area for Thursday. They still could, but right now there's just a little bit too much uncertainty to make that kind of guarantee. I did want to show you real quick, water temperatures are predicted to remain above average off the Gulf and Atlantic coast right on through the early part of summer, and then things start cooling with respect to average. That is La Nina at its finest here, but we do see with a more neutral forecast and maybe an El Nino starting to develop over the summer, we see some cooling with respect to average, which will be something we'll have to keep an eye on here during tropical season. The PNA, this is a teleconnection. When it is positive, that means we see a trough in the east and a ridge in the west. And positives are what we want to see for winter weather farther east and southeast. So those of you in the mid-Atlantic and southeast outside the mountains that haven't gotten any snow want to see this number stay positive. However, it's going to go negative here according to pretty much all the guidance we've looked at. But there is some spread once we get to about the middle of February where some of the ensemble members show that it tries to get back to positive. which means maybe a better chance for some winter weather over the second half of February. But right now, I'm not seeing enough certainty for that, as you could expect a month in advance. So the potential for seeing a major winter storm, major snowfall farther south and east is not very high. It's a little bit better though, but it's not high. So speaking of the snow, we have not seen quite a bit of it, except across northern Maine and over the Great Lakes regions where there was a lot of lake effect. From NOAA, at the midpoint of meteorological winter, only 2 places in the eastern United States had above average snowfall. Everybody else was slightly to significantly below the average. We have not yet seen any measurable snow in DC or Wilmington, Delaware, or New York City even, or Philadelphia. It snowed heavily briefly, but not enough to cover the ground in these places. When you get farther west, it has snowed back in the central Appalachians and the Ohio Valley, but it's still been below average. Pittsburgh is still about 10 inches below the average for this time of the year. When you get into New England, it's a difference between southeast New England, where Boston really hasn't seen much of any significant snow. But when you get farther north in New England, Burlington, Vermont, and Bangor, Maine have had some significant snow, but are still running close to 50% of the average. The only places that are getting close to average right now happen to be Erie, Pennsylvania, still a bit low, but Binghamton, Syracuse, still low. And then because of the warm lakes and the cold air pouring in over it, we've had extreme amounts of snow in Buffalo. And this is something that certainly continues to upset a lot of you that want to see snow in the north and east. Every time we get a model that shows us the potential for a big snow in the east, what happens is it ends up like this, where it just shoots a bunch of bricks and says, hey, we're going to get a big snow, and then never really lands. So I'm glad you guys like my humor. I really am. Anyway, let's look at the ensemble total snowfall. And outside of this coastal New England storm, nothing really here until the end of the week. But boy, it could be a really big storm here across Colorado, Nebraska, and Iowa. And even the upper Midwest could see some significant snow this upcoming week. Now, notice things do start shifting south and east a little bit more. New England, the interior Northeast, do stand a better chance of seeing some snow this weekend, with the next storm the following week. And this is a much better look for snow in those areas I showed you that are in a hole, like Erie and Syracuse and Bangor and Manchester and southern Vermont, even parts of southern New England. But look at this: New York City, Philadelphia, DC, Baltimore. This is tantalizing, but it does not yet show you guys the threat for any significant snow. There are a couple of ensemble members that show a farther south track, meaning that we could have a snowstorm, but the average of the models continues to look a lot like it has here so far this winter, and that's just tantalizingly close, but not close enough. And the reasoning for that is the storm track continues to be a little bit too far off to the north and east. So we've got the exclamation point saying, hey, we're watching. We got to watch really closely, but there's not enough certainty at this point for big snow down here. Farther north, I think certainly that's going to be the case. So until this low track ends up over here and comes up the East Coast, and that's not going to happen based on the index that I just showed you, then we just don't see the likelihood of a big snow. The operational GFS gives us some good potential, though, across central and northern New England, New York, and Pennsylvania, but not quite enough. As we zoom in here to the northeast, you guys just aren't going to like what you see here on Long Island or in southern New England or in Philadelphia or DC. Just not enough to make things happen. And don't even think about it in the Carolinas once you get away from the mountains. Don't even think about it in Eastern Virginia, not at least according to this version of the GFS. So, but in the central U.S., looks pretty darn good here across Nebraska. We're seeing over a foot of snow showing up here on the operational GFS. Farther south, trying to get you guys into the southern plains here. I'll find it for you, south central. It could get a little bit more interesting here across western Kansas, maybe even Texas, but right now, just not enough of a signal for a big winter storm farther south. So we're going to continue to see the rain, but and maybe some ice, but not really any significant snow farther south. Just a little bit too warm for that. So anyway, I really appreciate y'all's time today. I hope you have a wonderful week. I am actually doing a fundraiser right now through St. Baldrick's. I'm not going to shave my head though, but I am going to shave my beard here on March 20th, and I'm raising money for childhood cancer. The reason why is that every 2 minutes, a child is diagnosed with cancer, and this is near and dear to me. So if you have some money, every bit counts. I see the number of subscribers. If each one of you just donated 50 cents, I would reach my $1,000 goal, and that means a lot to me. So I've had some people say just keep the money and don't shave anything. No, I'm gonna do it. I think it's too important right now to make that little sacrifice. But I really appreciate everybody's time, and I just wish you all have a wonderful week, a blessed week, and remember that God is in control here. We can only do our best to be prepared for the weather. We cannot outdo God here. And I am a Christian man. I just want to remind you all of that. It's very important to me. I've been called to be a meteorologist, but I've also been called to serve God and serve the heavenly kingdom as a brother in Christ, and that means a lot to me. And I've heard a lot of you say that God wants all this bad stuff to happen, and honestly, it's not God. It's the thief, the enemy, Satan, false teachers. There's a couple of verses I want to share real quickly that discuss that. The first one being John 10:7-10. Therefore, Jesus said again, very truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers. That means all teachers that have been teaching falsely, not teaching about God through Jesus Christ, but teaching that there are other ways to salvation, other ways to rule. All that have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Jesus Christ is the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and to have it to the full. What is the thief? Well, in my opinion, it's Mother Nature. It's not God. It's not God producing us. This is insanity. It's extremes. It's things that have happened, forever since the original sin, since Adam and Eve, since the great flood in Genesis. What is the thief? It's the news. It's the scare, the fear mongering. It's socialism. It's government. It's overreach. It's people that are taking God out of the picture, taking salvation out of the picture, and trying to basically get rid of it. And they're coming to steal and kill and destroy. But the Lord Jesus Christ is coming so that we all may have life and live it fully and have eternal life. John 3:16. The thief is also mentioned in 2 Peter 3. 2 Peter 3:10-13. But the day of the Lord will come as unexpectedly as a thief. Unexpectedly. That means nobody can figure out when that's going to happen. And I can't forecast it. I'm not God. I don't know when that's coming. The heavens will pass away with a terrible noise, and the very elements themselves will disappear in fire, and the earth and everything on it will be found to deserve judgment. Since everything around us is going to be destroyed like this, what holy and godly lives you should live, looking forward to the day of God and hurrying it along. On that day, he will set the heavens on fire, and the elements will melt away in the flames. But we are looking forward to the new heavens and the new earth he has promised, a world filled with God's righteousness. When the rapture comes, are you going to be saved, or are you going to be left behind when the elements melt away in flames? You've got that choice, and there is still time to make that decision. And I want to help you just to see that you can be saved. You can live a godly life. You can live through Jesus Christ, and you can share that with other people. I encourage you to do it because I lived 30 years without God in my life. I finally accepted Christ right before I turned 31, and now I'm 40 years old. In the last 10 years, the visions have come to me. God has shown himself through me, and I've learned to believe and to grow my faith, and now I've got the courage to share it with you. If you do not believe in God, I encourage you just to get around a few people who do and see why they believe that way. See what's important to them, why their faith is so strong. And if your faith is weak, that's okay too. Believe me, we've all had times where we've been tested. But know that the day of the Lord is going to come unexpectedly. And all it takes is just making that decision to follow Christ and to live a life, to be somebody who may be poor in spirit, but who is blessed. as Jesus Christ said in the Beatitudes. You are blessed, even though you come to me weary and poor in spirit. You've got a way to live where there are riches in heaven for you, and that means so much to me. So, if you are fighting that spiritual battle, I am happy to pray for you. If there's anything else that weighs on your mind, I would love to pray for you. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for watching this video. I will have more coming tomorrow. Please be safe out there. And again, my thoughts and prayers are with everybody who have lost their property, people who have lost lives here in the tornadoes of Alabama and Georgia, in the West Coast floods, and across the world as well with some of the extreme storms we've seen across southern parts of Africa, India, and in other locations. As an American, I love to predict the weather here in the US, but I know that there's weather worldwide and there's people worldwide that are suffering. And my prayers with those of you who happen to be in those areas. So God bless you all. You mean a lot to me, and I really hope that you come back and join me again tomorrow. Have a great day. God bless you.